Hi everybody, welcome back. We are looking today at Jeremy Duff, Elements of New Testament Greek. We're in chapter 11, the chapter entitled Special Verbs, and we're looking today at a category of verbs called liquid verbs. Now, if your brain just started to explode when we were looking at the first half of this chapter, at the second aorist, and you get to this and you look at Jeremy Duff's explanation on page 129, 130, and you're just thinking, this is too much, I give up. Don't give up. Please, please, please don't give up. I remember the first time I looked at this explanation, I thought, that looks really complicated. Really. And then I thought, hold on a second. And over the years I've looked at it, I thought, actually, it's not that complicated. I want to prove to you today, this stuff on liquid verbs is not as complicated. If you could handle, or even get close to handling the stuff on the second aorist, this is going to be fine. Today, I want to show you how that is. Look with me over here, and I'll explain. How do verbs normally form the future or the aorist? Just think about that for a second. Well, you've got the stem and you slap a sigma suffix at the end of the stem. If it's an aorist, you also put an epsilon augment at the beginning of the stem, and then you do the usual stuff with the endings. All simple, right? Yes. But there are some words, some verbs, where if you put a sigma at the end of the stem, it's difficult to say. And those are words where the stem ends in a rho, or a lambda, or a nu. Actually, also, if it ends in a mu. If the stem ends in any one of these four letters, then putting a sigma at the end makes it more difficult to say. And you can even sort of experience this a little bit now in the way that we pronounce things, although bearing in mind that we will find some things easier to say than ancient Greek speakers just because we're used to making different sounds with our mouths. But just try saying this, spaerso. Imagine forming the future that way, spaerso. The urs is awkward, isn't it? Apostelso. It's just awkward a little bit. Menso, that's not so bad. Something with a P, a mu at the end, sorry. It's not as easy to stick a sigma suffix there as it is in some other words. And so the way that Greek speakers developed to form the future and the aorist, which are the ones where you need normally to have a sigma suffix at the end of the stem, was slightly different. Instead of putting the sigma at the end of the stem, they just changed the stem. Sounds annoying, but actually it's not as difficult as all that to remember. Let me give you a couple of tips about how to remember it. The first is a tip which will help you to remember which verbs which verbs are so-called liquid verbs, which have this way of forming the future and the aorist. Here's how to remember it. These four letters at the end of the stem, mu, I'm going to write them in English characters, M, N, R and L, are the letters that come at the end of the stem of liquid verbs. And with great thanks to Marion Rakes, who was the lady who taught me Greek when I was at seminary. If you're watching this, Marion, thank you very much for everything. Mineral water is a liquid. Sorry, best I could come up with. Mu, rho, lambda. Mineral water. So if you just think of liquid verbs as mineral water verbs, yeah, I know, it's terrible, isn't it? But look, you're not going to forget it now because it's so terrible. That will remind you that they are verbs with a mu, a nu, a rho, or a lambda at the end of the stem. That will at least help you to identify them. We haven't got a mu one on this page here because Duff has only put the most common ones there. And there are a few others which are rare, but you'll soon get the hang of how the future and aorist are formed, so you'll start to spot them. Now, let's see what happens when you go into the future. The key thing to remember is, apart from this change to the stem, the other rules are all followed in the normal kind of way. So with the future, well, you change the stem. So just as an example, spero goes to spereo, and it's quite common for a liquid verb to form a future with an -o in it, this will then conjugate in the normal way that an -o verb conjugates, like phileo, and you remember that from ages and ages ago. So spereo, change the stem, and you've got the normal ending on the end. Not too difficult. Apostello goes to apostel with a single lambda, apostelleo. So you've got some differences there, and a difference in the stem. Meno goes to meneo. Now in this case what you've got is something a little bit intriguing, because you'll know if you conjugate meno, you get meno, menes, mene, menomen, menete, menusin. And if you conjugate meneo, you get meno, menes, mene, menumen, menete, menusin. In other words, this, when it conjugates, will only be different from this in the first and second person plural. Otherwise, it'll be identical. How do you then tell the difference? Well, the answer is you couldn't tell the difference unless people added an accent to it. And Jeremy Duff explains this. This is a nice little explanation, end of page 130, 131. If you've got one of these verbs where it would be ambiguous, then the future will have a circumflex accent over one of the vowels in the ending. How on earth am I going to remind you of that? Really easy. I'm just going to do this. There's a big fat oversized circumflex hovering over the future, and you're never going to forget that now because it's so big and ugly. So if you've got a verb with a circumflex accent over the one of the vowels in the ending, then just take a look. Make sure if it's a mineral water verb, if the stem ends in a nu or a mu or a rho or a lambda, then be very careful. It could be a future, because you remember Steve Jeffrey once drew a big fat circumflex over the future on this video. There, straightforward, right? Now that's the future tense. What about the aorist? Well, in the aorist, remember I said that all the usual rules are followed apart from the change of the stem. Okay, so what's going to happen with the aorist? You're going to have the epsilon augment. So spero goes to espera. You've got the epsilon augment. You don't have a sigma suffix for the reasons I explained earlier, but otherwise it's nice and normal. Espera, and then all the usual endings for the aorist: elusat, elusas, elusen, amen, ete, an. That's all going to be fine. Also, you've got the similar rules if you have a compound verb. So apo plus stello. So where is the epsilon augment going to be added here? Well, it's going to be added always, always, always to the beginning of the stem, and then the omicron elides, because it's a compound verb, so it's o has disappeared, apestela. Stel has gone to stale. And then neno, again, is obeyed the same rules here, epsilon augment. Meno has gone to maina. Now, I haven't done a detailed study of this to see whether the epsilon sound here in the present tense of liquid verbs goes to an epsilon iota diphthong in the aorist tense of liquid verbs. Maybe somebody's done like a little short project on that and just analysed all the verbs in the New Testament and in other ancient Greek texts and worked out whether that's the case. I'd love to know. Stick it in the comments if it's true. But it works at least for some of these. And here's the key thing. It's the sort of clue that you need. If you see something that looks a bit odd, then this is, if you know what liquid verbs are and you're familiar with the principles, then you can reverse engineer them to get to the point where you can understand things. And here's a general principle, which actually is going to start becoming more and more useful for us as we're working our way through the book. There will be some people out there watching these videos who memorise everything. God bless you. If you are one of those people who's got like a photographic memory, or you're able to discipline yourself in that kind of way so you can memorise absolutely everything in Duff's book, then fantastic. Go for it. It will be wonderful. And the one occasion in your entire life when, you know, some strange form of the optative appears in the middle of Luke's Gospel, you'll be the one who doesn't need to go to Bible Works or Accordance to look up what it means, because you'll know. Fantastic, wonderful. But the rest of us, mere mortals, what we generally tend to do is we simply can't memorise everything. Or we don't. Maybe we could. Maybe if we were more disciplined, we'd be able to memorise everything. But what starts to happen from about this chapter onwards is that you do want to keep memorising the vocabulary. You do want to keep memorising all of the major, significant forms. I think you want to memorize all this stuff about the second aorists, and you want to get you familiar with those stems. But truth be told, we're not going to memorize absolutely every liquid verb stem in the aorist if it only appears 3 times in the New Testament, are we? But if you have a good understanding of how these words work, then when you see something that's a bit strange, you'll be able to figure out what the options are when you're reading a text in Greek, and you'll be able to, so to speak, reverse engineer it so that you'll be able to translate it, or at least narrow down the options so you know what the various possibilities might be. All right, that'll do you. We have done, amen, with the special verbs chapter. Apart from, I'm going to come back and do some examples with you in the next video, I think, because that's so much more fun, and you guys seem to enjoy that a little bit more as well. So we'll do that in the next video, then we'll move on to chapter 12, which is entitled The Third Declension. Oh, goodness gracious, a whole bunch more nouns next. Excellent, wonderful news. So we'll do that in the next video, but let me just keep reminding you, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, 5 or 6 days a week is far better than a crash course of 4 hours every month. So please, please, please keep going. Learn the vocab. Learn the vocab. Do the examples. And as you get more familiar with it, you can now probably start picking up a Greek New Testament and actually start reading it. Pick up 1 John or something, and you'll be able to read that really, really easily. I read it with my kids. It's lots of fun. So God bless you. Keep working hard at that, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.